It's with great pleasure I have in introducing our first speaker, who's internationally renowned in his area, and you'll see Professor Jerry Bodeker's in the bio notes, but he's written extensively in this area, and I'd like to welcome you to the stage and look forward to your contribution.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm aware of the acute irony of talking with you about wellness through a heavy cold. I hope that you can understand me. I'm normally quite understandable, but I'm a little husky today. I'd like to begin, as have all the other speakers, by expressing my appreciation to the Larrakia people, for sharing their beautiful and powerful land with us for this event, and pay respects to their elders, present and past and to come. And I'd like to begin with just a short excerpt from the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which, as many of you will know, took a very long time to reach passage. But there is a section in there which states very explicitly that Indigenous people have the right to their traditional medicines and to maintain their health practices, including the conservation of their vital medicinal plants, animals, and minerals. And in that context also it's stated that Indigenous individuals have an equal right to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, and that states should take steps to ensure this. Now, clearly, those two go together. It's what we would call integrative medicine. Question is, are they going together? This is just a shot of the World Health Organization Global Atlas on Traditional, Complementary and Alternative Medicine that my colleagues and I at Oxford University produced for WHO in 2005. It was the result of a 3-year public health mapping exercise looking at trends in policy, legislation and regulation and use in traditional medicine. The first map, without going into great detail, green and shades of green show use to high use of traditional and complementary medicine worldwide. A couple of little white spots simply meant that the data didn't come in time to meet WHO's publication deadline, but we know that they should be green. What you see is a green world in the sense of use of traditional medicine. There is nothing alternative about so-called alternative medicine. It is mainstream for the people of the world. Half or more of the population of most industrialized countries and 60 to 90% of the population of most emerging economies use traditional medicine on a daily basis. And the map below, the yellow, indicates in 2005, and it's a lot more yellow now in 2012, the formal recognition of Chinese medicine around the world. Starting in China in the Far East, you can see how this has become globalized. Britain now is yellow, and other parts of Europe are also yellow, as there's been official licensing and regulation in support of Chinese medicine. And I show you this because we're talking about Pacific and Asia in this conference, and I'm going to talk a lot about Asia. Here's a summary of the trends from the Atlas. As I said, majority use, but they're paying for this themselves. There is some government support, but mostly people pay out of pocket for what they want. Asian health systems are globalizing. Ayurvedic medicine from India is following Chinese medicine. Governments are now focusing not so much on promotion, but on safety and regulation and professionalization issues. Women, interestingly, are leading this trend. Twice as many women in a general analysis, are using traditional and complementary medicine. When you look at conditions like cancer, 5 times as many women as men are using complementary approaches, and same with skin conditions. And men and women use the approaches differently, and perhaps in question time we'll be able to go into that. Some of the key points about traditional medicine is that it's not just a collection of herbs, use this for this and that for that, but there's a knowledge system underlying the use of species and therapies, physical therapies, as medicine. They reflect worldviews of cultures, and in this nature is central. Nature reflecting an order, reflecting the same laws of nature governing the planets as govern the processes of the human body. And in this balance is of central importance in traditional health systems. Balance and harmony between individuals, between society and nature, and between societies. There's also a concept of synergism in the combination of multiple ingredients. It's the opposite of Western pharmacology, which is not interested in the synergistic activity by and large of multiple ingredients, but is interested in isolating a single ingredient to use as a magic bullet to knock out a bug. The synergistic approach says multiple ingredients attack the bug, reduce the toxicity of some of the ingredients, stimulate the immune response, etc. And then there's the principle that food is medicine, and medicine is food. I've given a couple of examples there in a book that colleagues and I did on traditional medicinal plants and malaria a few years ago. One of our contributors, the late Professor Nina Etkin from the University of Hawaii, reported on her work with the Hausa people in Nigeria. And Nina was doing research on malaria, and she said, "What plants do you use to treat and prevent malaria?" And they told her. And she said, "Okay," and she stayed for the rainy season. Nobody got malaria. She said, "How can you say you use these plants to treat malaria? You don't get malaria. You must have some sickle cell condition that gives you immunity to malaria." They said, no, we sometimes get malaria. Then she analyzed their food, and she found that as the seasons changed, as the damp season, the rainy season was coming on, just before that, the women would change the herbs to prevent damp conditions that they would use in cooking. And it turned out that they were the same herbs used to prevent and treat malaria. So actually coded in the culture, and she studied the plants, and of course they had direct antiplasmodial properties. Encoded in the culture without this knowledge of plasmodia and Anopheles mosquitoes and so on, the culture was just spontaneously in this harmonious way, living with the seasons and preventing malaria. Same thing with the Maasai, with whom I've worked in the past. Professor Tim Johns, also a colleague at McGill University in Canada. Some of you from Canada may know Tim. Tim asked the obvious question that the Maasai, who have what's been described as the world's worst diet, meat, milk and blood, why don't they have heart disease? One reason may be because genetically they're not disposed, another may be that they exercise a lot. But Tim found that when the women cook this soup of meat, milk and blood, they used a particular and selectively a stick from the acacia tree, one of the acacia species, that turned out to have lipid-soluble properties and was breaking down the fats in the meat and the milk and so on, so that it was actually a heart-healthy diet. Again, medicine encoded into food cultures. Around the world, there is now a revitalization of traditional health knowledge, and it's with that backdrop that I'd like to talk about this with implications for wellness tourism. First of all, what is wellness? Again, it's one of those things that there are many definitions for, but a good one offered by the National Wellness Institute in the United States offers 6 broad dimensions of wellness, social, occupational, spiritual, physical, emotional, and intellectual. And within each of those areas, they say that wellness is an active process through which people become aware of and make choices towards a more successful existence. Not a more healthy existence, a more successful existence. Health is one of the categories, but so is spiritual fulfillment, so is intellectual satisfaction, so is social contextualization. And then another definition by the LOHAS group, some of you will know, Lifestyles of Health and Sustainability, add in social justice and environmental sustainability to a conceptualization of wellness. What about the wellness market? Sorry, that slide has got a little unbalanced there, but the numbers are important. Stanford Research Institute just last year published a study on the global wellness market using 2010 data. They'd done one in 2007, and I was there when they presented both of these reports. In 2007, they valued the global wellness market at $1.1 trillion. In 2011, 10 presented in 2011, they valued it at $1.9 trillion. In other words, in 3 years, the global wellness market had increased in value by $0.8 trillion, $800 billion. Now, this is at a time when there was a global recession. The wellness market had increased, had almost doubled itself. This is not trivial. And you can see some of the elements of this. The global spa industry, just in terms of revenues, was $60 billion. The value of the global golf industry is $80 billion. So pretty close. You can see healthy nutrition, $250 billion. This has found its way into spas, which are moving out of their pampering mode of some years ago into becoming wellness centers. And Spa Finder, which is a group that analyzes trends and promotes spa experiences and so on, has tapped the Indigenous experience as being one of the leading trends now in the industry. With my colleague Professor Mark Cohen at RMIT in Melbourne, we produced a book. It was the first book that wasn't just a glossy coffee table book on the spa industry. There are no pictures in this book. There's only one on the cover, that's it. It's all information, called Understanding the Global Spa Industry, where we try to understand this huge industry that is basically chugging along on its own with a huge economy, as you see, but largely ununderstood. One of the things that is a feature of the wellness industry is that people are making choices based on evidence. People are very evidence savvy these days. And I just want to share some findings from volumes and volumes of research that are of interest. In acupuncture, for instance, it's effective in pain management, and people are interested in it because of that. In research we did in Oxford on 15,000 people, we found acupuncture more effective in low back pain management than physiotherapy. It's also effective. Facial acupuncture that you see in this picture is effective in stroke rehabilitation. Yoga is not only good for integrative exercise, but it reduces cardiovascular and diabetes risk. It also reduces age-related deterioration, just to show you you're never too young to take up yoga. And Tai Chi, in studies and meta-analyses of studies, has been found to be the best means of preventing falling in the elderly. In Britain, the National Health Services spends over £100 million a year on the effects of falls in the elderly. Hip replacements, wrist fractures, and mental health treatment for people who are afraid of falling again and won't go out and don't cook and eat properly, nutrition levels go down, etc. Tai Chi has been found to be so effective in preventing falling because people are learning to keep their balance in motion. So if they get into a fall, they can correct out of it. That it's now recommended by the American Geriatric Society, along with reduced medication as a means of preventing falls in the elderly. And then there's meditation, where research has shown consistently, and this is US government-funded, NIH-funded research, in this case on transcendental meditation, showing that it consistently reduces high blood pressure to the level of antihypertensive drugs. Now, I'm not doing this to introduce you to the benefits of complementary medicine or whatever, but to show you that there's evidence out there, and people who are interested in wellness tourism are interested in evidence where it exists. At the village level, an institute whose board I'm on in India, in Bangalore, the Institute for Ayurveda and Integrative Medicine, has introduced home herbal gardens with Adivasi groups. In India, the so-called tribal people, 65 million people are Indigenous communities, the poorest people in India. And simply by giving people information on a dozen or so different herbs to grow in their gardens, and you can see this is not what we would call much of a garden, but it's enough to keep a family healthy. And this lady is an enabler, a village resource person from the Women's Committee who's acting as a trainer. And over a period of a few months, there was an 80% reduction in healthcare expenditures by the people with the home herbal gardens. Health expenditure is the third biggest area of expenditure among the poor in India after food and shelter. It's bigger than education and whatever else. So if they're spending 80% less on medicines because of this, then that can go towards kids' books and so on. And I mention this because I'm going to talk about community contribution and involvement in the wellness tourism industry. But before I do that, I'd just like to address the issue of standards in wellness tourism. In Japan, you'll all know, the Japanese have this tradition of thermal baths. They've made a benefit of living in a tectonic plate fault area, and they get lots of hot water coming up. Some of it actually is full of arsenic fumes, and you wouldn't be advised to have a bath in those onsens. But they've set standards for what is an onsen, what is acceptable practice. I learned about those standards when I first went into an onsen in Japan, and ladies were on this side and men were on that side, and I was given a little towel. So I modestly walked in with my little towel like this, and all the men looked at me and they all had their towel on their head. And they probably thought, what's he hiding? But actually the towel on the head was to dip in cold water and keep your head cool. But they set standards. In Thailand, of course, those of you who've been to Thailand have probably been pushed and pulled with Thai traditional massage. That actually has its roots in yoga, not in conventional Ayurvedic massage, where a lot of Thai traditions come from. And the positions for this are recorded on the walls of Wat Po monastery in Bangkok. Some of you will have visited. And these are now accorded UNESCO heritage status, these illustrations, again setting standards, customary standards from within the tradition for how this should be practiced. Then there's the issue of ethics and acting locally. Six Senses Spa, just as one example of many, in Hua Hin in Thailand, a very successful, multiple award-winning wellness destination resort, buys all the herbs that they use in their spa from the local village community. They also put a percentage of their profits back into the local school, and they employ people and train them from the local community. And this is an active principle and philosophy of community engagement and responsibility. There's a revival now in Malaysia of traditional Malay medicine. I did a book in 2009 on Malaysian health traditions and was fascinated through that process of working with traditional practitioners to learn about the traditions of the Malay kingdoms. And now through this, they're standardizing Malay urut Melayu, traditional Malay massage, so that it's passed on through training courses run by the practitioners and experts to new generations. And resorts are now picking up the aesthetics of the Malay istana, the traditional palaces, as well as the village-style treatments. And again, there are examples of people of resorts and spas buying locally, creating employment through women's groups, and so on. And the same thing we see in the Philippines, where hilot, which is the traditional Philippine massage technique, is widely promoted now, and there's been EU funding to create this as a new profession and set up training schools with master practitioners to pass it on, so that hilot that's practiced in the spas is not done by people, as we heard in Xingjing's presentation, pretending to be local, but people who are local and who are licensed as being authentically local and qualified to practice this traditional art form. So the point here is that to license, to pass on in this formal sort of accredited way, is one approach that's being used, and it requires documentation. These are some of the projects that my colleagues and I in our project, Gifts of Health, the global initiative for traditional systems of health, are doing. With refugees at the Thai-Burma border, we've been documenting the traditions for 10 years, and I'll show you that in a minute. I've just come from Bali, where I got this throat as a gift from traditional architecture, where there was a mouldy thatched roof and all the spores were fanned down straight into my lungs. And in Yogyakarta, we're working on traditional jamu drinks and their preventive health effects. An EU project in Africa on this, and with the Qatar Foundation on wellness traditions of the Islamic world, documenting these traditions. Here's the Karen just as a case study. I just want to mention to Anita that the neck rings are with the Pa'o people, and the Karen, but they are one of the significant hill tribes. And we were asked by this lady here, Dr. Cynthia Mong, who is a refugee doctor herself from Burma, and set up a free clinic on the Thai side of the border, treating refugees running away from the very brutal Burmese army, and we hope all that's in the process of changing now. You can see the very simple village conditions here, and this is a refugee camp. And Dr. Cynthia asked us to help document the herbal traditions. She said, I'm a modern medical doctor. I don't know this tradition, but we can't get medical supplies across the border always to people in camps up and down the Burma side of the border, because it's landmined and the Burmese army is attacking, and we need to train the local people how to use the plants around them as medicine, and they've been dislocated and they don't always know the plants in the new areas. So we started working with herbalists. This is a modern medical doctor here. These are the herbalists documenting it. We worked with Buddhist monks who are master practitioners. We documented all of this. We worked with women, documenting women's knowledge. We fed this back to the community here. My students were working with us here. Back to the monks, back to the herbalists. And from this, they began building these clinics themselves up and down 200 kilometers of the border. And books were produced in their own language, so that now all the families have a home herbal book to use for their health care. Based on that, this is the community involvement. I was asked, quite out of the blue, by Four Seasons tented camp in the Golden Triangle, to help them find local approaches to use in their spa. Many of you will know of the Four Seasons tented camp. It's a multiple award-winning destination resort, but it hasn't been a wellness destination resort. It's just a geographic destination resort. Elephant rides. They do have a spa and a beautiful location. For $2,000 a night, you can stay in a tent. And So I asked about this, and I was offered a cup of Twining's tea, and I said, how about a local tea? Oh, they didn't have any. And I said, how about a carrot juice with some of your local herbs? No, they didn't have any carrot juice. I said, okay, well, we've got to start from the beginning here. So I said, can your gardener come, and let's just go for a walk with your gardener on your own property. So we did, and I said to the gardener, when you were a kid, what did your mother and your granny give you if you had a stomach ache, or if you had a headache, or if you had a fever, or if you had a cut? Now this is the plant that he showed me if I said, if you had a cut. Well, we had one of the Four Seasons international staff joining for this, and she went and, befriended the elephants, and as she was walking back, she met some of the local wildlife in the form of a very big ant, which took a bite at her dainty foot in this pretty little ballet slipper, and she was in such pain that she couldn't really talk. And so I said to the gardener, have you got anything for this? He said, yes. This. I said, the same thing you use for cuts? He said, yes. I said, okay, well, put it on quick. So he did, and as he was rubbing it on, she looked up and she said, there's no pain. Just like that. There's no pain. Now, any of you have been bitten by those big ants, you know what it's like. It's seriously painful, and it goes on and on. There's no pain. So from this, we gathered a collection of herbs. You can't see so clearly here, but these are torch ginger flowers, and we brought those back. And these are Centella asiatica, gotu-kola, known in America and Europe, Brahmi in India, daun pidu in Indonesia, pagagar in Malaysia. It's the same plant. It grows throughout the tropics. It's the most important plant in Ayurvedic medicine as a brain tonic and for improving skin quality. I asked him if he had any. He said no, and then when we went on the walk, I said, what's this? He said, it's water lily. I said, it's not water lily. It's gotu-kola. So the torch ginger lilies went into this dish, and the gotu-kola went into this dish, and suddenly they had the beginnings of a wellness cuisine. And from that, we had a medicinal walk, we had wellness cuisine, and then I said, where do you get your herbs from? And they said, oh, there's a local group. This is our CSR, our corporate social responsibility. We support a group of retirees, and they make these for us. I said, let's go and visit them in the town. So we did, and you can see the herbs there. And as we were walking along, I noticed in their storeroom back here this, and I said, can you ask one of the people to come over? They came over. I said, what do you use this for? And they said, oh, that's for the pigs. I said, I see. And what do you give it to the pigs for? They said, well, the pigs get worms and stomach infections, and this gets rid of it. So then I called over the Four Seasons Tented Camp General Manager and Regional Director for Spa and showed them this. Explained to them, this is Andrographis paniculata, which multiple studies have shown is the one plant in nature which has the most powerful effects in inhibiting the HIV virus. Significantly reduces HIV levels. And I said to them, do you have any HIV problem in this area? This is the Golden Triangle. Do you have any HIV problem? They said, yes, we do. I said, well, here's a CSR initiative for you. Four Seasons can support the local hospital in making tea bags out of this, give it out for free to everybody who's got HIV. It will not cure them, but it will bring their viral load down, which will make them far more functional throughout the day. That's now happening. On the point of integration, traditional medicine integrated into United States Indian Health Services alcohol rehabilitation program, just a conventional AA program plus a sweat lodge and perhaps a traditional healer, was 50% more effective than just AA on its own. Just to conclude, in Australia, surveys show that this sort of distresses me. This is a survey, it's now 13 years old, but I haven't found a more recent one, that in most regions of the Northern Territory, more than 22% of Indigenous people had used bush medicine in the previous 6 months. People here from the Territory, can I ask you, do you think that less than a quarter of the people in the Territory, Indigenous people in the Territory, have used traditional medicine in the past half year? Only a quarter or less? You believe that? I personally don't believe it. What I think is that we don't know, and this is where documentation is important, how widespread traditional medicine use is, and it matters for wellness tourism if you want to harness it. Australian Geographic just recently published a list of the 10 most important traditional medicines in Australia, which is a very arbitrary kind of thing to do because there's so much regional and inter-community variation, but you'll recognise some of these. And the kakadu plum has the highest concentration of vitamin C of any known species. Obviously, that's of interest in wellness tourism. It's also of interest to local communities instead of vitamin C to prevent upper respiratory infections, particularly in children who are most vulnerable to it. And those two can go together. The same with the tea tree bush, and the snake vine here that you see is one of the Tinospora species, which I don't know if it's been studied here in Australia, but in India, this same species prevents malaria and is a very powerful antiviral agent. So there's a lot of work to be done here. There's an emerging body of literature on bush foods and some bush medicines, not enough on bush medicines, I think, and some spas are beginning to make offerings in this realm as well, such as the Daintree Eco Lodge in Queensland. To conclude, to pull it all together, and I'm sorry if I've gone on a bit long here, I just want to close with some key principles of Indigenous wellness tourism. One is the point that all my colleagues, the previous speakers, have made as well, is authenticity. Wellness tourism must reference long-standing principles underlying traditional practices, the correct performance of treatments and the correct deliverers of treatment, and the correct formulation of products accompanied by traditional narratives or stories. Some sort of standards and standard-setting bodies from within the culture, not from the government, from within the culture, focusing on traditional standards, regulatory standards, and hospitality standards. One of the sort of perennial debates that I have in India, because I speak often at Ayurvedic congresses, is with Ayurvedic doctors who put out a sign and they say, oh, we now are a spa. We used to be a clinic, but now we're a spa. Everybody's into spa, so we're a spa. And I have to point out to them, you're not a spa, you're a clinic. A big difference between a spa and a clinic is in a clinic, the doctor is king. In a spa, the guest is queen. And women are by far the greater users of spas, and they expect hospitality standards, not clinic standards. And this is really important in wellness tourism, that people are treated with respect, they are treated according to standards of hospitality, not sit there, wait, doctor's ready, grubby waiting room, all of this sort of thing that you get in traditional clinics. Where possible, I've mentioned some of the research in various modalities. Where possible, if there's research, share it as part of education for your guests because they want to know, does this stuff work or is it just nice? And if there's no data, partner with your local universities to generate this and have your tourism authorities work with the CSIRO and whomever your national funding bodies are to get this kind of research going. I'm international advisor to the Australian National Institute of Complementary Medicine, and the one drum I've been beating is, please do research on Indigenous medicine. All of your research is on Chinese medicine and European herbal medicine. How come you're ignoring the biodiversity of this amazing land? There should also be a personal journey. Like we did the medicinal plant walk with the gardener at the tented camp, that now is a walk for all the guests. We want to extend it to the elephant walk because I discovered that the plant that healed the lady's painful ant bite is also used by the mahouts. If the elephants get a gash on their leg, it's packed into their leg. It stops the pain, it stops the bleeding, and it heals the wound very quickly. Now, if the guests can go on the back of an elephant and have the elephant pick up a plant and pass it back, and then they learn this is what is used to heal a cut, it's not just a walk through the jungle, wow, bamboo and palms and green, but it's an education about the properties of the forest itself. And then again, the final point is this corporate social responsibility, which is increasingly an outmoded term. The concept of being socially responsible is increasingly looked at as something that needs to be programmed into the DNA of corporations. But the point here is that wellness tourism, Indigenous wellness tourism, cannot only be for luxury purposes. It must benefit local communities. And on that note, relieved that I made it through, I'd like to thank you all.